In this video, I'm going to give you 5 steps to heal from a toxic relationship. Hi, my name is John Hawkins Jr. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and certified trauma specialist and co-founder of Hawkins Counseling Center. Over the years, I've worked with thousands of individuals who have extricated themselves and healed from all types of toxic abusive relationships, from psychological abuse to sexual to physical, emotional. And I've developed kind of a 5-step process through the experiences with these thousands of clients that I walk people through to help them fully recover from what they've been through. Now, these steps, even though on one hand, I believe there is like kind of an overall order that you need to kind of walk through, on the other hand, it's a very non-linear process at times. This process is very messy, it's going to be imperfect, and that's fine. And so I want you to understand that. I want to emphasize the non-linearity of it so that you don't feel like something's wrong in the way you're doing it, or there's a lot of shame in extricating yourself from these kind of relationships. So again, remember there are these stages or steps, but also that needs to be individualized to your experience. And I meet my clients where they are. You might be watching this video and you might be anywhere in those 5 steps. You could be in step 1, step 5, step 3, and then we can kind of bounce around. You might be in step 4, have to go back to step 1 sometimes based on circumstances. So just like I said, really work towards some self-compassion, self-acceptance. Also, whoever is on your team of support, make sure they can make space for that as well. So step 1. Step 1 is a bit of a crisis management stage in many cases. It's extricating yourself from the toxic relationship. So you might be watching this video and you're in that right now, and you actually might need some step 2 work, which I'm going to explain all these steps in detail that help you complete step 1. You may have extricated yourself or removed or disconnected from the toxic relationship, but you're not fully free from it. Sometimes the other, the abusive partner is still contacting you, threatening you, being coercive, manipulative, using finances over your head. You may have removed yourself and you still have some ties that bind, so to speak. You might have kids with this person. You might have a business together, finances entangled. And so then I can't eliminate all contact with this individual, except in extreme cases where there's physical violence and abuse of that degree. So then it's coming up with strategies for, how am I going to deal with the co-parenting? How am I going to deal with some of these financial things? And so, the second step is really going to help you with that. And that is, as you're getting out, or you're still in that process, but maybe you physically removed yourself, you're not cohabitating, you've broken off a lot of the contact. Step 2 is really identifying and obtaining the resources you need. Often in these kind of relationships, the person was threatened by any external relationships with family, friends, any of your individual pursuits or passions or hobbies. They try to squash that stuff, or with passive aggressive behavior, they feel very threatened, and so you end up cut off from a lot of your relational resources. You may have been, a spouse who agreed to raise the children. That could be male or female. And so maybe you haven't been in a workplace in a decade, or you don't really know what's going on financially. The other person has really held these things tight, not giving you any of this information, which is financially abusive. And so, your first step is trying to connect, either reestablish or identify and develop for the first time some of these social resource support systems. So the reestablishment, one of the places I see people get stuck often is a lot of shame, because maybe people, they had to constantly cancel, engagements or schedules with individuals because the person kept forcing them to do that, or they consented to it, or to appease them or keep them from being abusive. And so there's a fear that I'm ashamed of this behavior, that I allowed this, maybe other people did get frustrated with me to some degree. And so that's a block. So then obtaining, a counselor, a therapist, somebody that can help me work through that part of it, some of the shame or fear of rejection, some of that stuff. So then you can start to access that, and that's not going to come up typically with someone like myself, because I have no history with my client. And so they don't fear my rejection as much, or the embarrassment. They know I'm dealing with things like this all the time, and I've helped so many people, with these kind of things. So overcoming that, bite the bullet as best you can, just get out there and start connecting again. For most people, again, you may have some people that did withdraw and that don't want to deal with, any of this anymore, but you typically will have some people that have compassion. Maybe they've had similar experiences. Their friends or family who have felt powerless, they do want to engage and help you. So just push through that if you can. If you can't, get a therapist or counselor or somebody that can help you overcome this, start reconnecting. If you don't have any of that to reestablish, but you need to start developing this, don't worry. I mean, so many times my client has nobody but me. That's the starting point. And so we start to work through that, work out some of their relationship patterns that aren't functional or healthy, that are impeding them from developing, that social support. So then, like I said, all hope is not lost. It's very common for me to start with someone that has got nothing in terms of relational resources. And then we, build out from there. We branch off from me and start to develop things. There's support groups you can identify from people that have gone through toxic relationship, podcasts, YouTube channels, websites, that we're always happy to give these resources to you to start. Or I've even had people, see my YouTube videos or things like that, contact me from other states, countries, all over the place. And I'll, provide them with resources or help look them up in their area. So just start where you can start. I know it can be discouraging and lonely often, but just get going. And like I said, maybe financially, I need to access social services or nonprofit agencies. It could be, again, male, it's not gender specific, but it could be a women's shelter. You might be a single mom with 2 kids and I've got no access to money or employment, but there are resources out there probably more than ever before. And just start Googling things like contacting people, contact, Department of Health, the City Hall, anywhere, and they'll start to connect you with some of these resources. Do Google searches where, again, it's not a forever thing, but you might need, assistance like food stamps or some kind of nonprofit funding. I have clients that their faith community or some nonprofit might pay for a period of time to work with someone like myself who specializes in trauma, and they want to support you, so just get going, find these resources. You could get on a Facebook support group of people who've gone through toxic relationships. That there's a big part of this where you felt so isolated and alone. So just even hearing someone else's story, many of my clients reading books about living with an extreme narcissist or an abuser often can just start the process of undoing aloneness, where they can feel like, okay, other people have been through this too. Even some people who are pretty accomplished, it could be celebrities or well-known people in the media where, wow, they went through that too. It can de-shame a little bit, where I don't feel quite as embarrassed or alone. Or again, there's many podcasts and YouTube channels dedicated to this stuff, and you can start and grow from that. So really start to develop those resources. Another crucial piece about getting these as quickly as I can, even though they might take time to develop, is there's a lot of vulnerabilities. That fear of finances, fear of being alone, feeling like nobody would ever want me. All these things can be hooks for that toxic partner to pull you back in, and so some of my clients, this happens to, and I want them to feel extremely safe and accepted by me. If they went out that weekend and agreed to a get together, actually, maybe had sex with the toxic partner, whatever it is, I want them to know there's gonna be zero judgment, complete safety as they come back in, and we just keep working from where they are. Like I said, it's messy, it's bumpy, it's confusing, but just having people who are willing to be in it with you to work through that. Then we start transitioning into the third step, which is processing the trauma of what you've been through. And so often people are very out of touch with this because they've used defenses like disassociation, which is one of our big defenses against trauma, denial, other emotional, relational defenses. So you're really not in touch with actually how damaging or wounding the relationship was. And if you're still kind of struggling with so many of the objectives in step 1 and 2, oftentimes it's not safe to start opening this stuff up because you're still under threat and survival mode and managing the crisis, or you don't have somewhere secure or safe or supportive to go back to in between sessions and things like this. So, that's why it's imperative to get some of that support, because a lot of these guys or women, I've dealt with people who are toxic on both sides, so it's not gender specific again, is, there are some people who are very violent and abusive in extreme cases, but for a lot of these individuals, it's really driven by shame and insecurities. And so when they know you have support, when they know you have friends, you have family, they're going up against not just you, but your support system. They don't want to do the things out in public that they do in private, because they would not want to be exposed. There's a lot of like hidden abuse and things like this. And so then also moments of loneliness or unworthiness that could come up that can really pull you back in. I mean, it's a painful state for every human being to feel alone and unworthy. And that can make anybody reach back out. And then you feel more shame about doing so. Then you withdraw from your supports because you're embarrassed to admit to them, oh, I went back to the person and spent the weekend there, or I had sex with them, or I gave them money, or whatever it was, and now I'm getting like pulled back this way. So your supports are the barrier that are gonna help you prevent that from happening. So then back into step 3, where we start really like processing and healing from what you've been through. Trauma is stored in the body. There's a lot to it that I can't extensively go into in this video, but what I want you to understand is you can't talk it away. And so even though you can start where you can start, traditional talk therapy can't resolve trauma. Yes, it's going to be very valuable to you to have a safe person who's empathetic, who can listen to you, give you some guidance potentially, but all that trauma is still going to be in my body. So you need to work eventually with somebody who has the neuroscience understanding and training of how to access and clear this from your system, even at a neurological level, and help create positive, what we call neuroplastic changes in your brain and nervous system that allow you to fully recover. Otherwise, you're going to get a degree of recovery, and this stuff is going to keep showing up in your body as body memories or reactive defenses that are going to keep affecting future relationships, whether that be romantic, friendship, whatever. So, you know, now at this day and age, everybody in the world has access to some of the best clinicians there are, because everybody, including myself, we do in-person or virtual or all virtual. So you have access to people you never would have been able to get access to years ago if you lived in certain areas of the country, remote areas. So now that's one problem that's been solved. It's accessible everywhere. The other thing I know for a lot of people is finances. So that's why I'm saying start where you can start, you know, whether it's a mentor, a coach, a friend, a therapist, maybe even if they don't have the advanced trauma training, but they have enough to be supportive and get you going, help you start processing some degree emotionally. And then as you develop more resources, then you can go in and see somebody like myself or somebody who does this kind of work to get, you know, specific work done. There's a lot of my clients that are temporary clients. They have wonderful therapists that they've done really great work with, and then they send them to me because they know, like, okay, there's some specialized stuff that John does. Go there, work on these targets, resolve that, and then they go back to do, you know, the regular psychotherapy with the therapist they already have. So again, just really educating yourself. There's so many wonderful books. I mean, this was a book for clinicians initially, but I've had so many clients in the last 5 to 10 years come in reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. They're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's a pretty big book, and there has gotten really popular. There's other works. Again, there's like TED Talks, all these kind of things. There's so many resources that you can start undoing the aloneness and educating yourself with. And then also, probably almost 100% of the time, I find that these traumas from the toxic relationship landed on pre-existing traumas from other relationships in adulthood, adolescence, or childhood. And so, you know, that's another factor that's going to move into step 4 in a second, is these now can become, you know, you can be aware that these things are there and they're kind of commingled with these more current traumas. So now I can finally heal these. And that transitions into step 4. Step 4 is identifying and resolving the underlying emotional vulnerabilities that allowed me to get in the toxic relationship and remain stuck in the toxic relationship. And so the reason I put this closer to the back end is if people start going to this right away, they almost always end up in a bunch of shame, self-contempt, self-criticism. What's wrong with me? How could I be so stupid? You know, the humiliation, and it's not going to be beneficial to helping you heal. When you complete step 3 work and you're able to really process these current and, you know, historical traumas, it leads to a really increased level of self-awareness and a lot of self-compassion. So when we're doing step 4 work of identifying the vulnerabilities, we want to do it from a place of self-compassion and non-judgment. Otherwise, I'm going to go back into step 3 and do more work until you're ready for step 4 work. Now, again, this could bounce around. You know, you could go into step 3 and start to understand and identify some of the things in step 4. Or the person could start to make threats and, you know, try to, you know, he could break into the house or show up at work, or all these crazy things that people experience in the more extreme cases. And that might put me back into some step 1 work. or I might lose some resources and stuff too. They have to reestablish or gain new ones. So again, it's just this, and that's why having somebody guide you through this can be, it really is essential, you know, whatever, and you need a whole team, you know, like take all the help and support that you can get. The last stage I would define as integration. So let's say you've gotten to a safe place, you've got social support, you've got great resources, you're in a better financial situation now, you've got new opportunities, I've healed from these traumas, I've achieved what we refer to as post-traumatic growth. Even at a biological level, I've developed capacities I didn't previously had. Maybe I have the highest level of self-confidence I've ever had, which is earned from putting in all this hard work. I've developed a belief in myself I've never had, in my abilities, my intelligence, all these kind of things. But now it kind of, generates this desire to maybe achieve my potential or develop a healthy relationship or pursue a fulfilling career or some, meaningful activity or healthy spirituality, all these things. So these things are all new, super positive, but they're new. And with the new comes excitement and some anxiety. I've never done these things before. The possibility of failing or, struggling comes up. So even though this is a great place that most people have never even been to for the first time after they've healed all this other stuff, it's still challenging. And so, again, I could be here and then that could activate maybe some insecurities, some other things that didn't get identified in step 3 and 4, that now I have to go back and do some of this work in those steps. Doesn't mean I need to put this on hold or stop it, but then it'll reveal itself and then I can keep going forward and overcome and keep getting to higher and higher levels. So I hope that makes sense. Get through the crisis, get out, get your resources going. 3, process the trauma. 4, identify the pre-existing vulnerabilities, because saying this will never happen to me again is not going to be sufficient to never have it happen again. And then 5, like, oh man, now I'm in this amazing place, now I do these amazing things, but it's still challenging and I still need encouragement, support, and challenge. So there are millions of people out there going through what you have gone through, been through. Like I said, you'd be shocked at some of the people, because this has nothing to do with your intelligence, your character, your strength, your courage. This is biological. What happens when you get in these kind of relationships where you end up in shame and self-doubt and isolation, and your sense of self-worth just gets shredded, and then you have no financial resources. So it's a big task to try to say, like, okay, like, how am I going to get out of this? And so whenever I meet someone and they got out of those kind of relationships, I'm always like, man, like, I'm so moved or impressed. And I say that so sincerely, because getting out of a toxic relationship or a negative relationship is one of the hardest things you will ever do. And people would say on the outside, well, shouldn't it be easy to just walk away from somebody who's abusive? Absolutely not, because there's so many emotional vulnerabilities and hooks that make you vulnerable. And that's why it's such an amazing thing to be able to overcome. And it's because inside of you, you do have the strength, the resiliency, the courage, the fortitude, the persistence, the grit to do it. You just need a little bit of support and help from things that, from people outside yourself to really believe that and help you tap into it. So I hope this video has helped you, and we succinct it down to these 5 steps that are hard and difficult and scary sometimes, but achievable and doable. Just need somebody to be in it with you. And I hope this video helps some degree of that, or gives you a path of where you can go and what's possible for you. And believe it, and I know you can do it.